as well as how much he brings a really solid knowledge of people and safety to the job. One of the things that Jeff also does is focus on continuous education and learning and building relationships, whether it's with safety, Cal OSHA. He has the strong technical knowledge, but also the people knowledge that helps us and clients move forward safely and in a compliant manner. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce you to Jeff Eckmann. And Jeff, please take it away. We look forward to hearing from you.
All right, thank you, Lisa. So good morning, everybody, for those of you that attend. So kind of the reason for today's topic is find a lot of issues when reviewing clients' safety programs. Well, one of them being their injury illness prevention program being not necessarily complete or out of compliance altogether. The reason being is that a lot of, if you use kind of payroll system or some of the insurance carriers, they will provide clients with a safety program. Doesn't necessarily mean it's Cal OSHA compliant. So that's the issue is some of the payroll systems or insurance, they may be set up in Ohio and so when they write a book, it kind of covers the whole US and they don't really tailor it specifically towards that company, what they need, or even put an injury illness prevention program in there because having an IIPP is something specific to California only. So that's the big reason for having this. So what we're gonna do is kind of get into this really brief. We only got about 30 minutes, but we're going to cover what exactly is an IIPP, okay, who's required to have one, how to put it together. There are different resources available for that. What is included in an IIPP, and then how often should your IIPP be reviewed or updated? Okay, so what exactly is an injury illness prevention program? Okay, so this is a basic, it's a basic safety program. It doesn't have to be terribly extensive, but there are certain portions in it that need to be covered. And it kind of shows, so if I'm an employee and I come to your business, I can grab your IIPP, read through it and understand how your guys' safety program works, what's expected out of me, how I can get additional help and resources. All that's gonna be listed in there, okay? Now, the big one is, because everybody always asks, well, I only have 3 or 4 employees. Do I really need one? Okay, the answer is yes. So this is for any company in California. As soon as you employ one person, you're required to have an injury illness prevention program, okay? The only ones that are exempt is if it's family members, so it's a family employed operation, they don't need one, okay? Now, as far as having an effective IIPP, okay, the big thing on this is your regulations and how you manage your safety program, okay, is very important because the big one, as you can see here, it's going to help you reduce costs because it's going to show, hey, how are you going to provide training to your employees? How are you going to do inspections to identify hazards? Okay, how are you going to handle any kind of complaints or safety concerns? Okay, that needs to be in there. And a lot of times what we see is somebody will just print off kind of a predetermined download and they go, oh, this is good enough. Yeah, at the same time, it'll meet Cal OSHA requirements and you won't get cited for it because you do have one. But at the same time, if you're not following it and doing what you're saying you're doing in your program, it becomes an issue. And that's where we see a lot of companies start to have additional injuries, reporting issues. It just goes down a hole. So back to that, who needs an IIPP? And like I said, I review quite a few safety programs, and I notice more and more with these larger ones, paychecks, stuff like that, when they provide a client with a safety program, a lot of times it doesn't even have an injury illness prevention program in it, okay? Because like I said, if you're working in Nevada, you're not required to have one, but as soon as you get into California, you are. And this is one of the first things that if you're audited by OSHA, they do ask for a copy of your injury illness prevention program. The other thing is that if they do ask you for a copy, okay, remember don't send them your whole safety book, your 300-page safety book, okay? You're sending them just your IIPP, which is usually about no more than 10 pages long, okay? But like I said, for California, it is required as soon as you have one employee, okay, you are required to carry an injury illness prevention program, okay? Now, putting one together, because this is where I get a lot of questions on this, okay, is your program, so it has to be in accordance with Title 8, okay? So Title 8 is all Cal OSHA regulations, and what we see a lot of times is when you get these insurance carriers that provide a safety book, that it's not necessarily California compliant. The thing is that your programs, so written programs such as fall protection, scaffolding, okay, different things like that, silica, they need to have a Title 8 section added to it to show that it's in California compliancy and that you're following California regulations. So that's where a lot of confusion happens on that, okay? The other thing is that when you're putting one together, you have to look at what industry you're in, okay? Whether it be general industry, construction, if you're in petroleum, shipbuilding, or tunneling, mining, okay? Each one's it's gonna carry a different, there's different things that need to go into that injury illness prevention program, okay? So first we have to identify what industry we're in, and then we can start putting it together. Okay, now the great thing is that Cal OSHA, they do provide a template, okay? And if you go to their website, so the www.dr.ca.gov, okay, it'll bring up on their main page. If you scroll down on their main page, you can find a section. It's gonna have two different headers. One is employees, the other one is employers. You can see here they provide a ton of different information that you can get a hold of. If you look on there under the employers, they have a bulleted section, develop an injury and illness prevention program. Okay, by clicking on that, there's a templated copy that you could download, okay, and you can edit, and it tells you exactly what to edit, what to add, and kind of how to formulate it based on what industry you're in, okay. Another great one that you can use as well, okay, or I'm sorry, here's further on that Cal OSHA template, but yeah, once you click into that, okay, you can see here it's breaking down into if you're a high hazard, okay, so high hazard employer would be if you're in construction, okay, or guide to developing workplace injury loss prevention program, okay, that's going to be more for general industry. The great thing on Cal OSHA is they also provide it in Spanish, so if your predominant workforce is Spanish speaking, you can provide a copy of your IIPP in their language as well, okay, because remember, Cal OSHA requires there's two different written programs that have to be in a language understood by the majority of employees. Okay, that's your injury illness prevention program and your heat illness prevention program. Okay. The other one, if you don't want to go the Cal OSHA route, another one you can do is you can see on the bottom is State Fund's IIPP Builder. Okay, so they do have a template as well. Here's the link for that if you want to go that route. I was messing around with it the other day. It's very straightforward. It's kind of looking at what industry you're in, what are your hazards, and then it helps you put one together. Okay, so that's another option. A third option, if you don't have time for that, you can also contact me, myself. I will help you put one together. It's not a huge deal. Now, this is where a lot of people, they go, oh, I have an IIPP. Okay, but it ends up being just a written safety program, which is different from your injury illness prevention program, okay? In that IIPP, and this is how you make sure you have all the correct topics in there, okay, is you have to have listed responsibilities. So it's who's responsible for the program as far as management, who can your employee go to, who's gonna hold them accountable for making sure they're staying safe at your facility. Okay, for the compliance aspect, you're going to put in as far as how you're going to do routine trainings, how they're going to receive that, when they're going to receive it. Okay, as far as hazard inspections too. Okay, when you're going to do site inspections or facility audits. Your communication. Okay, that's how are you relaying all of the safety information to your employees. Okay, as far as hazard assessment, remember, okay, you do have to do for general industry. It's required at least twice a year, you're doing a hazard assessment of your facility. Okay, for construction, we recommend doing a monthly assessment, okay, or as needed. So these can be done through JHA, so your job hazard analysis forms, or you can find one online. If you just Google hazard assessment form, general industry, you can find there's a ton of different templates that you can find, and you can utilize those. If you're having difficulty with that, once again, you can contact us. We'll get you set up. Okay, accident exposure investigation. You are required to have that. It's going to detail for your employees how that's going to be done, when it's going to be done. Okay, you need to have a form in there. The big thing is that if there is an accident, okay, or a near miss, it needs to be documented. Okay, Because what happens is when you fill out your log 300s at the end of the year, okay, Cal OSHA can request the previous 5 years. They're going to look through them, review it. They're going to say, hey, from 2 years ago, hey, you know, we saw you had 2 employees that year had an exposure to a chemical. Where are the accident investigation reports for that? So you need to keep record of those. Make sure don't just fill them out and discard them, because you could be asked to provide that information at a later date. Okay. Hazard correction. So I know the biggest thing is if you do have an accident, okay, you need to have corrective measures, how you're going to fix it so that another employee doesn't become injured by that. If you don't, and the big thing is having that documentation, because in showing you corrected it, otherwise you could be charged with a negligence or willful negligence, okay, or a repeat citation if you do get caught up in a Cal OSHA inspection, okay. Training and inspection or instruction, that needs to be in there. And as far as providing in a language understood by the majority of employees, that's a big one. Okay, and that's if majority of your employees are Spanish speaking, you might need to have a translator in there and document it that training was provided to them in a language understood. Okay. Employees' access to the injury illness prevention program. That was a recent one that was just added this year. Okay. Cal OSHA, they are checking for that. We did have a client, they didn't have that one section in there, and I think they got cited. It was $130 for not having it. So make sure you do have that in there. Like I said, that was just recently updated. You can find that on the Cal OSHA template, and you can kind of copy and paste in yours, or you can reach out to me and I'll get you that section you need. And then going in the record keeping. Okay, record keeping being for our log 300 forms. Okay, remember, if you have more than 10 employees, you're required to keep a log 300A form, okay? Make sure you have those current, up to date. Don't wait till the last minute, because we see a lot of times Cal OSHA comes in, they go, hey, I wanna see your previous 5 years, and clients are scrambling to get all their records together, okay? It's better just to have them every year, remember that, okay? The end of January, get those buttoned up. They do have to be posted from February 1st through the end of April, okay? Now, is my IIPP up to date and in compliance? Like I said, not having that most recent change in section that did cost the client $130, and it is listed as a general citation for them now, so it's on their record. Okay. Now, as far as reviewing your IIPP, okay, you should sit down with your management team and review it at least on an annual basis. Okay, or if there's a new hazard that has been discovered. Okay. You need to, if you do make any changes due to a recent hazard or an annual review, make sure that you're dating that, because Cal OSHA wants to see as well that you're actively participating in changing this as needed throughout the year, okay? It's not, because they'll look on there, maybe there was a date, last review 10 years ago, okay? Probably out of compliance. In a good Cal OSHA rep, they're gonna look through that and they'll tear it apart, okay? Like I said, if Cal OSHA, if they do, because you get a request for documentation, if they are auditing you, one of the first things they're always going to ask for is a copy of your injury illness prevention program. Okay. If you're unsure of the documentation that they're requesting from you, or you want somebody to review it prior to sending it in, please reach out to me. I'll help you look through it. Make sure you have the right stuff to send to them. You're not sending them something that's out of date or incomplete. Okay. Once again, if you're unsure, please reach out to myself or Lisa, okay? Number and email are all there. Now, I wanted to kind of get through this quickly, because I'm sure there's gonna be some questions. I wanted to leave plenty of time for that. This time, are there any questions that we might have?
Thanks, Jeff. We do have a question that has just come in. Is COVID considered a new hazard?
No, so you should have your COVID-19 prevention program, your written program. Make sure keep that separate from your actual IIPP. The thing is that if Cal OSHA does request, they're going to ask for your IIPP, and then they will want to see a copy of your COVID prevention program along with training. That's the biggest one. Make sure your training is current to the recent changes. Okay. That's a good question, though.
Thanks, Jeff. Another question. How much is the fine for not having an IIPP?
Okay, so not having it, they could cite you as a serious and up to $14,000. But usually for an IIPP, honestly, it depends on the rep and what they're looking at, what other citations you're having. They may start tacking it up. So the way they would do it is if you don't have an IIPP, they could charge you as a serious, so up to 14,000. Then let's say it was you had a fall, okay? You don't have a fall protection program. They're gonna cite you an additional $14,000 for not having that program. And then they kind of just go down the line as the programs you don't have, or if they're out of compliance. Because the same thing too, we see a lot with fall protection programs. Make sure, review your programs if you are, your employees are working at heights, because a lot of times if you have that payroll or insurance company from Ohio, they're gonna send you out a federal regulation fall protection program, okay? Make sure, review it, make sure it has Title 8 regulations in there so that it shows you're following Cal OSHA regulations, okay?
Thanks, Jeff. Another question, can our company IIPP be stored digitally, or should it be in a hard copy as well?
Yeah, so great question on that one. The thing with, so they state employees have to have access to it, okay, in a reasonable time. So what we're seeing now is some companies, because everything's going digital, is setting up QR codes. So it has a link to their actual IIPP and all their safety programs. Okay, so as long as your employees can gain access to it, it can be stored digitally. If not, you can do hard copies as well. They're just going to want to see that if a Cal OSHA reps comes on your job site or your facility, that when they ask to be presented with it, you can get it to them in a timely manner. So that's the big one on that. But yeah, I'm seeing a lot more QR codes, because the issue is, let's say you have, I don't know, maybe 20 hard copy books out, and a new change comes in. That means you have to pull all 20 books in and then reorganize them, get new sections in. So it kind of becomes time consuming. And then you're not sure if all of your books out in the field are current. Whereas if it's stored on a PDF through a QR code, you're able to instantaneously update that program.
Thanks, Jeff. Another question, is it required to be in a language other than English?
Yeah, so as stated, so the big one, and you can see there, Cal OSHA's template, they do have it provided in English and Spanish. The big one with that is that it really comes down to training. Did you provide training that an employee in a language that was understood, right? The other one, because like I said, the heat illness prevention program, that is required to be in both English and Spanish if the predominant language spoken is Spanish. I've seen that recently get cited, and I think it was a couple $100 for not having one. If anybody, if you do need one, reach out. I have copies. I can get you set up with one. But it's a good idea to have, if predominant language is Spanish, have that injury illness prevention program in Spanish as well, because it's really going to benefit you as the company. Because like I said, it's setting guidelines to be followed to keep your employees safe, to keep your injuries lower, and reduce your mod rate.
Thanks, Jeff. Another question, do I also need a code of safe practices along with my IIPP?
Yes, so you do have to have a code of safe practice. Okay, once again, that's going to be separate from your IIPP. And a lot of times what will happen is Cal OSHA comes in, they're going to request a copy of your IIPP, your code of safe practice pertaining to specific operations. Yeah, that's the other thing is when you set up a code of safe practice, okay, it needs to be specific to the hazards presented at your job site. So let's say, for an example, we're a framing company, right? In that code of safe practice, you should have general construction codes and then specific ones such as use of a hammer, use of a skill saw, dynamic nailers, ladders, scaffolding. So there's a variety of different things. The reason for that code of safe practice is that, once again, it's not only providing the training and having the documentation on that, but at the same time is, let's say I'm a new employee, I've been trained, but maybe I've forgotten, and I want something to be able to reference. Hey, what does the company expect of me? What do I need when I'm using the skill saw? What PPEs should I be wearing? Okay, and what hazards should I be aware of, or what should I check before using it?
Great, thank you, Jeff. How many pages should my IIPP be?
You know, I've really seen it vary. Majority of them are no more than 10 pages, because we see some that they get 30, 40 pages long, but it kind of defeats the purpose, because it's really a brief outline of what is expected. And the other thing is, if you get something that's 40 pages long, is an employee really going to read through all 40 pages? So that's where we kind of, it's one of those less is more. It's very, hey, this is how we handle, out of the 9 different topics, this is how we handle each one. But it really depends on the hazard and kind of the situation that the company's going through. Like I said, your injury illness prevention program, it should be like a living, breathing thing that's constantly reviewed and analyzed and worked on. And that's something that I know I help out with other vendor reps and their clients is, setting up these annual reviews. Hey, let's look through your IIPP. Let's see if there's anything that needs to be changed up. Are there different hazards that we're noticing that it can be fixed through documenting and then following up on it through training, through holding those accountable. But yeah.
Great. Another question. How should I train employees on my IIPP?
So when you get a new hire, and this comes up a lot too, when you get a new hire, we highly recommend you have a kind of an onboarding process with them. So you go over the company, kind of the requirements, regulation. If they're injured, what do they do? Who do they notify? Paid sick leave. Go over, what hazards they're going to be associated with. Because remember, before any employee is involved with any hazard that they could get injured, you have to show them training. So if they're getting at height, needs to wear a harness, training on that, training on ladders before they actually get on there. Same thing with the IIPP, you need to go over that with them. And what we do a lot of times is we provide that employee with a copy of it that they can keep. I know one company, they made kind of like a pocketbook of their IIPP, and it's in both English and Spanish, and they provide it to all employees upon hire, and they make them carry that IIPP on them, and they quiz them on it too to make sure that they know what is in there and what's expected out of them.
I like that. That's creative. So far, that seems to be the last of the questions that have come in. Feel free, we'll give you guys maybe a few more seconds to send any additional questions you might have for Jeff or Lisa.
Yeah, like I said, it was just to be brief, because Lisa, like what we found going to some of your clients and reviewing their actual safety books is a lot of them, they don't actually have an injury illness prevention program, but it's more so a safety policy. And that becomes an issue, because then the company gets audited by OSHA and find out that they don't even have an actual IIPP when they thought they did. So it's this was just bringing awareness. If you are unsure of what you do have, like I said, we go back here. You can email me, email Lisa. I'd be more than happy to do a brief audit and make sure you have everything that you need in it, or even give any suggestions to changes.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, Jeff. And you're right. There's sometimes an idea that you have a safety manual and a binder, and somehow that is your IIPP, but really it's not. You need to know very crisply what that is. And appreciate you mentioning the onboarding process too. I think that's super important for new employees, that it be formal and documented, and that there's a checklist for the onboarding specialist to follow. The majority of workers' comp claims, if you look at the time frame of how long they've been with the company, the largest group is that first-year employee, and we want to help our employers stay with a great XMOD and good workers' compensation rates, and of course keep their employees safe and happy and coming into work and going back home safely. So appreciate that.
Yeah, and another thing, especially with the training, because I know a lot of employers face high turnover, so they don't want to invest the time and money in the providing training. But once again, remember, if your employee is seriously injured, what happens is that if you didn't provide them with any training, you become, they call it willful negligence. And what I've seen in the past is that employee ends up getting a lawyer, and they come back and put a personal lawsuit on that employer for lack of training, saying that they put them in a hazardous situation without any safety equipment or training. So it's very, very important to stay up on your training, especially with new hires. just so you don't end up in that situation.
Perfect. Well, thank you both for signing in and giving us some of the great answers to these questions. And Jeff, of course, you for sharing with us today about everything IIPP. We appreciate you all taking time out of your busy schedules to join us for today's BenderU. We do have another BenderU on the calendar for 2022. You're not going to want to miss it. It's our BenderU on labor law, our labor law update. So that's going to be on January 18th. Following this webinar, I'll go ahead and send you the flyer for that and with a link to register, as well as more information about what we're going to be teaching in that session. And as a reminder, this session has been recorded, and a link to view and share the recording will be emailed following the webinar, along with a copy of today's slide deck. Should you have any questions that arise after our webinar has concluded, we know that that tends to happen. Please feel free to reach out and we'll be happy to help you. But thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Lisa. And thank you again to all of you. We hope you have a wonderful day and a happy holiday season.
Yep. Thank you very much.